Good day, good morning, good afternoon. I hope you're doing well. I also hope that you had a time to do the readings and maybe homework and quizzes. I did my meditation, I did my readings, and I must say that I didn't expect that this course will be so difficult. I was assumed that 13 courses is the most difficult, but this is definitely, as Venerable Gyelse said, is one of the most difficult courses. Before we start the course today, it's our second class. Do you remember? We are studying ACI 15 with Venerable Gyelse, what Buddha really meant. And we in a school mind only, which is very difficult for me to take all the understanding about middle way, leave it behind the door, and put the hat of mind only. But we're going to do it because we have an amazing teacher. And before we start this class, I would like to take a moment for all of us and remember why we're here, our intention. Just take the moment. Maybe you wanted to help someone who is suffering right now. Maybe you want to think about your bodhicitta. Maybe you have amazing magical plan to save the planet. Just whatever it is your intention today, right now, just let's think about it for a few seconds. And on that note, I don't want to delay our teacher and this beautiful class. I would like to invite Venerable Gyelse. And please, please turn on your cameras. It's such a good idea to have these live interactions and see your faces. Literally see your faces.
Thank you, Natasha. And thank you, everybody who's here as well. And coming back to jump into these deep teachings, we really have to think about them, right? It's not something we can just say, oh, yeah. But we have to think about them and how we can use them in our lives. And setting our intention, our motivation at the beginning of class is really helpful for that. You can see all my boxes back there, huh? I don't quite have enough place to put everything. That's old Dharma stuff. It's like, what do I do with it? When we used to have classes on tapes, not even on CDs, but on tapes. So anyway, and as Natasha said, I don't know if she realized it when she was saying it, but this course, I want to invite you to have more interaction in this course and to be able to ask your questions and to make sure that you understand the material. I'll be asking you questions. So please don't hesitate. Please don't be shy. Let's try and figure out this stuff together, okay? Mazal? Agreement? Agreement. Okay. Thank you. Thank you. So, as we did last week, and we're going to begin with taking that intention and putting it strongly out into the world as our mandala offering. Okay? So, as I move everything around here on my two computers, there we go. Now I've got You're at the top of my screen. Nope. Pop. There we go. Okay. So, Sashi Puki Jukshin Meto Drum. Rirab Lingji Nyende Genpadi Sange Shingnu Mikte Urwargi Jokun Namdak Shingla Chuparshok Idam Guru Ratna Mandala Kamnir Yatayani Sange Churam Soke Chuknam La Janchu Pardu Dakni Kyapsuchi Dagi Chunyen Gipe Sonam Ki Jola Penchir Sange Druparsho Sange Chudam Soki Chuknam La Jangchu Pardu Dakni Kyapsuchi Daki Chushingi Pe Sunam Ki Jola Penshir Sange Druparsho Sange Chudam Soki Chuknam La Jangchu Pardu Dakni Kyapsuchi Daki Chunyen Gipe Sunam Ki Drola Penchir Sange Juparsho. So you might have noticed that I changed one of the words in the refuge prayer. If you're looking at the text, it says Daki Jinsok, which means by everything, the goodness that I do, right? By all the goodness that I do. And what I'm saying is by listening to these teachings, by the goodness of listening to these teachings, may I reach Buddhahood for the sake of every living being. So it's slightly different. And it's kind of like moving you up the ladder a little. Right? There's also one for the teacher who says, by teaching, by giving this teaching, may all of us reach Buddhahood for the sake of every living being. So if your ear caught that, I wanted to let you know what that was. It's like, what's she doing? Okay. So as Natasha said, we're in the course, What the Buddha Really Meant, ACI 15, Class 2. And in this class, we're going to talk about something called the 3 attributes of the mind-only school. And if you've been coming to Mixed Nuts, you probably know what those 3 are already. And you've probably heard them. But I know for myself that I can always use a review of them, right? And I'll just say them here at the beginning. Kuntaks, Shenwangs, and Nyongdrups. Okay. Those are the 3 attributes we're going to be talking about a lot in this course. Okay. It is, after all, a mind-only course. And these are 3 things that we need to totally understand to understand the mind-only school. So this text that we're studying, it's so important that in the monastery, people stop for a year after about, say, 10 or 11 years of study, and they memorize the whole thing. after they memorize it, they take it to the debate ground. And in the monastery, if you memorize the whole thing, you get a special award. And the text is Jason Koppa's explanation, basically his explanation of the mind-only school. And so the question comes up in the difference between the mind-only and the middle way, especially. How do we know when the Buddha was being literal? And how do we know when he was being figurative? So why do we even need to know this, right? It's very important for a religious figure, for a political figure, for a teacher. When are they speaking figuratively and when are they speaking literally? Right? Do we know when a religious leader is speaking figuratively? And if we get it wrong, it can be a huge mistake. You can be led down the wrong path, a path that can create danger for you and for others. And then also it can end up with making divisions with people, right? How many wars have been fought over religious idea? How many people killed? Hundreds of thousands of people. And yet, what does every religion teach? It teaches love and compassion and inner freedom. So we have to know, was that figurative or was that literal? Which one was it? Right? And all the other teachings that go along with it. So we have to be sure when a leader, any kind of leader, is speaking clearly or figuratively. And the thing is that, at least in Buddhism, different schools have different interpretations of that. When was the Buddha speaking figuratively and when he wasn't? So I might say, and this is like taking the Buddhist schools, I might say this was literal. And Natasha might say, no, it was figurative. And so we have to discuss it. That's what we're here for. There are 4 different schools, and they say different things, but we're basically studying 2 of those, the mind only and the middle way, the Madhyamika. So we have to ask this question, and I'll ask it of you. Is the mind only school correct? Let me see the chat here.
Depends.
What did you say?
Depends.
Depends. Good answer. Like, according to who?
According to the audience.
According to the audience. So if we were to take this to schools here, the mind only would say, yeah, I'm correct. And middle way would say, no, you're not correct. Right? It depends. So we mainly have to learn what's almost correct so that we can go through the weeds in our own mind. So we can pull out the wrong ideas about emptiness in our own mind. So studying these, again, I'm giving you a pep talk for studying this course. To hang in there only at class 2. they help us to understand our understanding of emptiness. And how do we do that? By studying the mind-only school. And that will help us to purify our own thinking about emptiness. And when you want to know whether what the Buddha said was literal or figurative, you have to go to a certain sutra. And do you guys remember what that sutra is called? It's called Dode Gondra. And I'm going to answer this question. Todd asks, why did the schools not debate to come to a cohesive result? I'm not going to assume that they didn't debate. And in fact, this is the debate, right? The third turning of the wheel that Lord Buddha taught is the debate. And because they have different levels of understanding emptiness, they couldn't agree on it. Just like us, right? When we have a different understanding of a situation than somebody else does, who's right? Sometimes maybe you can come to an agreement about who's right, but sometimes you can't because you have different understandings. You come with different life experiences. You come with different intellectual understandings, right? So that's why there are at least two different points of view here about what was figurative and what was literal. And as I said last week, even in our daily lives, we fluctuate, especially between mind only point of view, that this glass is literally out there, and middle way, that it is figuratively out there, right? So it's not just intellectual stuff. It's how we relate to our world, how we understand our world, and how we put it into use in our world. It's a good question. Yeah, like serving one meal to different tastes. Some feel like it's terrible. Oh, that food is terrible. And someone else is like, oh, that was delicious, right? Yeah. So we're studying Dode Gondrel. Say Dode Gondrel. This is the commentary on the intent, or on the true intent, sorry, of the sutras. For short, we can call it the sutra in which the Buddha explains all of his other sutras. It is the sutra in which Sutra, what does that mean? It means a teaching of the Buddha here. Doesn't mean a short book here. So we are talking about a sutra. Do de Gongzhou. So it is the sutra in which Lord Buddha said, oh, by the way, here's what I meant in all the other sutras. So this is commentary, is Lord Buddha's commentary. And we got here from the two turnings of the wheel. And we're still talking about the Bodhisattva's question. Anybody remember his name? Say Dundam. Yes. Dundam Yangdak Pak. Infinite wisdom. Mhm. So in the third turning of the wheel, in the 10th chapter of the Sutra of the True, the Sutra of the True Intent, the Bodhisattva says, Lord Buddha, humbly, in the first turning of the wheel, you taught us about the 4 Arya truths, the 5 heaps, the 12 doors of the senses, the 6 elements, the 18 categories, the 37 of categories of enlightenment. He's listing all these things, right? Including the Eightfold Arya Path. And that was super cool. Thank you for teaching those. And you said at that time that all these things exist by definition. Okay? You said that. Then, in the second turning of the wheel, Holy One, you basically said nothing has any nature of its own. Nothing starts. Nothing stops. Everything is in a state of peace. Everything is in a state of nirvana. So we're going to concentrate on the first one in this class. Nothing has any nature of its own. And the other 4 we'll go into next week. So we're focusing on Lord Buddha saying, nothing has any nature of its own. So, oh, Holy One, what did you mean when you said nothing has any nature of its own? By the way, when does the third turning of the wheel start? It starts when the Bodhisattva asks this question, right? First, you said all these things existed when you gave that whole thing about the 4 Arya truths. You said everything exists by nature. You never said anything about it not existing by nature. You said many things don't have a self sometimes. You said that. But you didn't say they didn't exist by nature. Then you said everything is suffering. There's a cause, and you can find a way out. This is how you get out. That's what you said in the first turning of the wheel. It's kind of a history lesson, isn't it? Then, when you got to the second turning of the wheel, when you were up on Vulture's Peak, using the Heart Sutra, for example, right? There are no eyes, no ears, no nose, no tongue, no taste, no touch. Your mouth doesn't exist. Your mind doesn't exist. That's what you said. And we're like going, what is he talking about? And you say nothing exists. Nothing has a nature of its own. You seem to contradict yourself, right? What are we supposed to believe in when you said those things? You contradicted yourself. And this is how the third turning of the wheel starts. Did you mean what you said in the first one or in the second one? Or did you mean something else? So Dundam Nyandak Pak, the Bodhisattva, he's much more focused on the second turning. Nothing exists. Nothing has a nature of its own. Don't you have the same question? Doesn't this glass exist? I can drink from it. Yes, yes, yes. So, what is Lord Buddha's answer? Lord Buddha responds by making fine distinctions about things, explaining that some things do have a nature of their own and some things don't have a nature of its own. And this is the third turning of the wheel. And it is called the turning of the wheel of fine distinctions. That's its name. So Lord Buddha says, Bodhisattva Tundam Yandak, I wouldn't say nothing exists. Would I say that? Of course I wouldn't say that. That's not what I would say. That's too radical. So don't forget, Lord Buddha says basically 5 very radical things during the second turning of the wheel. And Buddha is answering Dundam Yandak Pak. And what was Dundam Yandak Pak's question? What did you mean when you said the pen is not self-existent, right? What did you mean when you said the pen is no ni me? As you can see up right here in front of you. When you said it doesn't have any nature of its own. So try to get the same feeling, that the Bodhisattva is getting. Lord Buddha is standing up there during the second turning of the wheel. Lord Buddha is holding up this pen. Probably doesn't look like this. Probably not. It's probably a quill made from a feather, right? And he's saying, this pen doesn't have any nature of its own. What does that mean to you when I say that? This pen doesn't have any nature of its own. What kind of feeling do you get? Do you get a feeling?
Confused. Confused.
Can you speak up a little?
Confused.
Confused, yeah, exactly. It's like, what do you mean? And this is what we have to talk about. If this didn't have any penness of its own, and this, let's see, get something else here. And this didn't have any paperness of its own, then couldn't I just hold them up and they would look the same? If they didn't have some self-existence, they would look the same, right? It is confusing to say it doesn't have any nature of being a pen. It doesn't have any nature of being paper. So what the heck does it mean when you say it doesn't have any nature? From the Majjhimika point of view, It's your projection that makes you see a pen. Meaning it doesn't have any nature. So we're putting on the Madhyamika hat right now, right? I should get 2 hats in my office here. It's your projection that makes you see a pen. It doesn't have any nature of being a pen from its own side. That's what we would say, right? Because we're good Madhyamikas, right? Geshe Thupten Rinchen, who taught this to Geshe Michael, would say, throw that out, close the door on it. We're in mind only, not Madhyamika. We need to think like mind only for the next 5 weeks. Forget the projection stuff. We're going to learn emptiness the wrong way. And by learning it very well, by the end of this course, you'll be very well confused. You'll be thinking of emptiness like a mind-only school person. And then, you know what? In the last class, we're going to tell you, sorry, that's wrong again. And you get to go back to middle way school, where you're comfortable now because you're so well trained in it, right? So nothing has a nature of its own. Madhyamika Middle Way School says that this is literally true. Everything is a projection of your mind. But Lord Buddha here gives the Bodhisattva a response and says, he didn't literally mean that nothing has any nature of its own. He said that this statement really refers to 3 things. And those are the 3 things which make up the content of today's class. Lord Buddha replied to the Bodhisattva's question saying, oh, you're right, you know, I was speaking figuratively. Of course, not everything is so radical as that. If you said this pen has no nature of its own, you'd be saying it doesn't exist. You can see, you know, it works. I can write on a piece of paper and it works. You probably can't see that line because it's so little. Oh, you can, okay. It works, right? The pen works. That isn't what I meant. Why is he saying that? Because it's all they can handle. Right? Lord Buddha doesn't want to blow their minds up. We don't want to turn people away from us by saying something that they can't accept. We want to keep them close, right? And slowly, slowly, they accept more and more things. It's like almost like taming a wild animal, right? It's our wild minds we're taming. You know, you leave a little bit of food out some meters away from you and then closer and closer, right? So Lord Buddha's answer to the Bodhisattva's question, according to Madhyamika, right? Or according, let me see, think about this in my mind, what I'm going to say. So Lord Buddha's answer to the Bodhisattva's question in mind only is not literally true. The fact that Lord Buddha could intentionally respond in this incorrect way, according to who? Madhyamika, right? has two implications. So what are they? One, when you explain Buddhism to other people, it may, or anything really, it may be necessary to make simplifications. And those simplifications might be technically wrong. This is what I talked about me in the last class, criticizing another teacher for not teaching Madhyamika Prasangika view of emptiness. It's like, why are they leaving them hanging out there, right? It's okay if it keeps the audience engaged and is for the purpose of bringing them up to a higher level, right? And then two, you never know whether or not any spiritual teacher is speaking figuratively on purpose in order to attract students of lesser capacity. So you should never judge other teachers. You can judge the truth of their statements, but never criticize other teachers. Do you remember what Lord Buddha said? He said, do not judge others. If you are not me or someone like me, do not judge others, for you will surely fall. And wise teachers frequently adjust their message to fit the audience. So you can't be sure, right, that some other teacher isn't also adjusting their message to suit a particular audience's capacity, or maybe even one person in the audience, right? You have to think about what's the most beneficial thing you can teach and how to teach it for your particular audience. So the Bodhisattva in the second turning of the second turning of the wheel, he says, you said nothing has any nature of its own. Did you mean that, Lord Buddha? And Lord Buddha says, oh, Bodhisattva, no, I didn't mean that. I'm not that radical. Come on. You know me better than that. I wouldn't say nothing exists. I wouldn't say nothing has its own nature. I had three different things in mind when I said that. So here they are. What are those three things? And this is the whole foundation of the mind-only school. If you understand what we're going to talk about today, you understand about 50% of the mind-only school. So here is the first thing I had in mind when I said, nothing has a definitive nature of its own. And I didn't write the transliteration up here, but you can pronounce it after me. Tseni, Nowo, Nime. Tseni, Nowo, Nime. Nothing has a definitive nature of its own. And this phrase refers to the first of the three attributes. If you say fire is hot, by definition, it doesn't mean that the definition of fire is hot. It means that the very nature of fire is to be hot. Or that a pen is something that writes from its own side. So the words are important here. We're talking about by definition. Fire is hot by definition. A pen, by definition, writes. By definition means from its own side, its own way, through its own nature. Can you imagine something that doesn't have an existence by definition? And Lord Buddha says, okay, let's take kuntak, construct. It means an imaginary thing or a construct, something that we construct in our minds. Let me ask you a question. Do constructs exist? Natasha says yes. I only see how many? 4 people here. Oh, lots of yeses here. Okay. A construct can apply to something that exists or doesn't exist. Right? Both. Like a sky flower, a flower that grows in the air, or a rabbit's horns, right? The imagination exists, but the rabbit with horns doesn't exist. So the imagination exists, but the thing that corresponds to that imagination, like the horns of a rabbit, that doesn't exist. And it is a construct. The construct is the imagination, and that exists. But there's no corresponding reality to it. So it means an imaginary thing or something constructed of the mind. And as everybody said, it can also apply to something that does exist. So there's this very classical example, famous classical example. There's a young couple and their family is blessed with a child. The mama is pregnant and a child and she's getting bigger and bigger. And Papa and Mama, they're waiting for the child expectantly. And suddenly one day, the baby is born, right? That's how it happens. Pop, the baby comes out. In this case, it's a story about a little boy. So a boy child is born. Now, in this story, just like in my own personal life, child is born and you don't have a name for this child yet. I thought I was going to have a girl. I was certain I was going to have a girl, and I had a boy, and I didn't have a name for him. It took us 6 weeks to name him. He was just baby boy up till then, right? So they have a boy child. They're trying to figure out what to call him. Here's this new being. What should we call him? And the parents decide on the name Tashi. And from then on, they think of him as our boy Tashi. Right? Was Tashi born with that name? No, but when they name him Tashi, they then have a mental image of this thing called Tashi. They apply the label to the thing. Our boy Tashi, right, is a construct. they have a mental image of this thing called Tashi. Tashi was just a thing that came out of the woman's body. It's just colors and shapes and probably noise. Right? We could call it boy, but if you think about it, that too is a construct. From then on, after they've named this blob, they think of him as our boy Tashi. And they think the child Tashi is out there. Right? So there's some kind of ball of flesh, and then there's the parents sitting back and looking at it, and they're thinking of the child as Tashi. In between their mind and this child is this construct, this mental image called boy named Tashi. You with me? So you have the little blob of flesh that is the object out there, right? You have the parent's mind that are thinking of the boy in a certain way, right? This is a picture of dear friends of mine. They don't know I'm using the picture, but I don't think they would mind. And those parents are constructing, their minds are constructing and applying names. Let's call him Tashi. And thoughts. This is our little baby Tashi, right? So that's the mind. We have the object, the baby. We have the minds of the parents. Oops, let's not go there yet because we're not finished with the last slide. And then we have the construct. They are naming or thinking of it as, that's our boy Tashi. That rests between the little baby and the parents' minds, that construct. When they talk about constructs, they talk about constructs also in two senses, name or naming and thinking, right? It's one thing to give it the name Tashi. It's another thing to think of him as Tashi. Constructs are created by names and thoughts. Name meaning like verbalization. Let's call him Tashi. Thought meaning thinking of him as Tashi. And we have to distinguish between these three things. Remember, there are two kinds of kuntaks. This is an example of a kuntak which exists. This is thinking of somebody in a certain way. And you have this mental construct. We're already getting very close to emptiness. The other is a kuntak which doesn't exist, like the horns of a rabbit. And we'll talk about it a bit later, okay? So there's obviously reasons why Lord Buddha is bringing up these three different kinds of no self nature. He doesn't answer the Bodhisattva saying, oh, everything's a projection. That's what I meant when I said nothing had any nature of its own. He says, oh, yeah, I didn't mean it literally. Don't take it literally. There's three kinds of things I meant. There's three ways in which things don't exist. Barbara, we'll get to that. Hold on. It's the booty. That things don't exist or don't have their own self-nature. One is all of those things in the world that don't have any definitive nature of their own. What does that mean? Of course, that's the Bodhisattva's question. What are those? Lord Buddha says constructs, kuntaks, things that you make up in your mind. Things that are just made up in your mind, that's all. That's exactly the first kind of no self-nature, whether they exist or not. Whether they refer to things that exist or not, it's all the things that you imagine. So we're beginning to understand the first attribute of the mind-only school. When we understand all three attributes, then you understand the mind-only school. So the first one is this kuntaks, constructs. There has to be an object there, a mind, and the thing the mind is constructing. Those three things. Okay. Lord Buddha said, when I said nothing has any nature of its own, here's the second thing I meant. Say, kewa, no, nimepa.
Nimepa.
Kewa, no, nimepa. And that means that nothing grows through its own nature. It has no nature of its own. Lord Buddha is saying, the second thing I meant during the second turning of the wheel when I got up and said nothing has any nature of its own, I meant there are certain things in the world that don't grow through any nature of their own. They don't have any nature of their own in the sense that they don't grow through any nature of their own. We're referring to things that grow or dependent things. And we can state it positively and negatively. Positively, anything that grows must have a nature of growing from its own causes and conditions. Can anything grow without its causes and conditions? Impossible. They depend on other things. So, we're getting close to dependent things, or you may know it as dependent origination. The whole description of the wheel of life, the 12 links of dependent things. So that's how we can say it positively. that things depend on causes and conditions to come into being. Like take this seed, for example, or this sprout. There had to be a seed. There had to be earth. There had to be water. There had to be sun. All of those things. Causes and conditions. Negatively, we can say, nothing has a nature of growing without its causes and conditions. Exactly, they're changing things. And and as they change, they have to have causes and conditions. Absolutely, that's where we're going with this. Subhuti, all of you guys, fantastic. Your minds are really working. Thank you. So all basically Lord Buddha is saying, look, there's certain stuff in the world that grows and it doesn't have a nature of growing by itself. Things do have a nature of growing from other things, and things don't have a nature of growing from themselves. So let's take something close to us in our own life. The biggest example is the suffering in your life. It has causes which you can figure out and stop. Negatively, nothing bad that happens to you just happens by itself without specific causes. This is the Arya truth of suffering. The fact that half the stuff that happens to you is bad, right? And the fact that the good stuff always changes and goes away and gets worse, right? Lord Buddha is basically saying, look, don't think what I said when I said nothing has a nature, when I was talking about cause things. Things that have causes, and specifically about the bad times in your life, all I meant was it doesn't happen from nothing. It happens from something. And if we can figure it out, we don't have to keep living like that. So this phrase refers to the second of the three attributes. Kewa no nimeba. Nothing grows through its own nature. Okay. And they are called shenwangs. So now we have kuntaks and shenwangs. Shenwangs are dependent things. Shen means other, and wang means power. So other powered, caused things. Right? Again, I want to go through it. Things that have a nature of growing from their causes and conditions and don't have a nature of growing on their own are called shenwangs, or dependent things. Again, an example, our aging and death are at the mercy of our misunderstanding. And that is link number 1 in the wheel of life. Dependent things are changing and cause things, and they don't have a nature of growing by themselves. They can only grow from other causes, Shen Wang. Our perceiving mind is also a dependent thing, but the constructs our mind perceives are unchanging things. That's what I meant when I said nothing starts. Nothing has a nature of starting. Nothing has any nature of beginning. That's all I meant. Would I say it's all a projection? No. So let me ask you a question. Is the third turning of the wheel in the mind-only school literal or figurative? When the Buddha is saying all this stuff, oh, I didn't mean it's all a projection. I didn't mean that. Is he being literal or figurative? In the mind-only school. So two people say literal and a third person. Now switch over to the middle way hat. Take off the mind-only hat, put on the middle way hat. What do they say about the third turning of the wheel? They say it's figurative. Right? Todd, can they come to an agreement? Right? Buddha was being figurative when he said, I didn't mean all that stuff about projections. Of course, things have a nature. I wouldn't say things don't have a nature. Right? According to the mind-only school, the Buddha didn't mean it when he said, nothing has any nature of its own. Figurative. According to the middle way school, it's literal. Okay, what about the first turning of the wheel? Oh, the five heaps, the four Arya truths, they all exist by definition. So for the mind-only school, is that literal or figurative? Literal. What about middle way? Figurative or literal? Do you all agree with Natasha? Or do some of you? I'll agree with Natasha. Yes, yes. Okay. Just want to make sure everybody's following along. So let's review. The things in the world which do have a nature of growing from their causes and conditions, stated positively, are called shenwang. Other powered. Right? So we now have two of the three attributes, kuntaks and shenwangs. Kuntaks are what? Yeah, it is hard. I totally agree. Kuntaks are what? Imaginary things, constructs, mental constructs.
Thoughts and names, yeah.
Yeah. And shenwangs are dependent things, right? Cool. You guys are with me. So we are taking all changing things here, meaning 99% of our world. Do shenwangs have a nature of their own according to mind-only school? Does your nose have a nature of its own? No, it doesn't have a nature of its own. It doesn't have a nature of growing without any causes. What about your mind? What about your house? It doesn't have a nature of coming from nothing. Right? Kewa no ni meba. Nothing grows through its own nature. And yeah, this may be the hardest class of the whole course. You're getting the structure of the mind-only school. And hopefully from here on, it should be easier. Let's keep our fingers crossed. So you're lucky you have this video, audio to go back to and listen again and again, right? Then Lord Buddha says to the Bodhisattva, here's the third thing I meant when I said nothing has any nature of its own. Some things I was talking about don't have a nature of being ultimate. So what does ultimate mean? What does Dundampa no oni mepa mean? Say Dundampa.
Dundam
Dundampa no oni mepa.
no ni mepa.
Thank you. It's good to hear you. Dundampa means ultimate. And no ni mepa, as if you've been paying attention, you know that it means has no nature. So nothing has a nature of being ultimate, and it has two meanings. Constructs are not ultimate because they're just imaginary things. They don't have any existence from their own side. How could they be ultimate? Dependent things are not ultimate. Shenmongs, right? Are changing things ultimate? No, because when you perceive them, you don't perceive ultimate reality. When you're perceiving ultimate reality directly, you are not perceiving a changing thing. You are perceiving emptiness. Is emptiness changing or unchanging?
Unchanging.
Yeah, unchanging. Emptiness is just the absence of something. Is there a two-headed 10-meter purple elephant in your room right now? First of all, they don't exist, right? They couldn't be in any room anyway. So that's one kind of emptiness in the room. It's that kind of emptiness that when you perceive it, it changes your reality forever. No, sorry, Ek. I'll slow down. And I can't see Vu's face to see if I'm going too fast for her. She doesn't have enough light on it. So that kind of emptiness is not really ultimate. It's not the ultimate emptiness. But it is a form of emptiness in your room, right? Does your room at a certain hour become less empty of a 30-foot, two-headed purple elephant? 10-meter high, two-headed purple elephant? No. It's either purely empty or not. Emptiness is just the absence of a self-existent thing. And a changing thing isn't ultimate because it is changing and comes from other causes. Emptiness is the pure absence of something, 100% absent. When we talk about emptiness, we're talking about something which doesn't exist now, which never did exist, and will not exist in the future. For something in this room or in your room, right, to be self-existent would be exactly the same thing as anything in this room being a two-headed purple 10-meter tall rampaging elephant. Equally impossible. There ain't no such thing. There never was, and there never will be. And this room is empty of self-existence too. A self-existent thing can't exist. This room has always been 100% empty of self-existence. Self-existence is an unchanging absence of something that is the ultimate reality. So can dependent things, shenwangs, which grow from their causes and conditions, be ultimate reality? No, they can't, because they change. Exactly. That means the postman you see and the mail he delivers to you is not self-existent. That postman and the mail come from causes and conditions. Even mind-only school says that. They're shenwangs. Was the postman born a postman? You have the object, this person. You have the thought that they are this thing in your mind, and you label that thing, thoughts and names, right? And then you have the whole construction. Okay. So imaginary things can't be ultimate. Shenwang, kuntaks, right? Shenwangs can't be ultimate. So the third turning, the third of the three attributes is what we call yongdrup. Say yongdrup. Total existence or totality. So yongdrup is the word for the lack of an ultimate nature. This is the mind-only school's term for emptiness. They don't call it emptiness. They call it totality or yongdrup. Literally, yongdrup means everything exists. And it means that the minute an object exists, it is 100% empty. It's a code word in the mind-only school for emptiness. In mind only, they call it totality. Take a big breath, relax, be happy. Don't worry. We're going to go over these three qualities again and again. Okay? So back to Barbara's question, we need to talk about what it means to exist by definition. Rangi Tseni Kijupa. You'll hear this, if you stick around long enough, you'll hear this phrase over and over and over again. Rangi Seni Kijupa exists by definition. I don't even know what time it is. Okay, I just checked the time. It means to have some nature of existing from its own side through some unique way of being. Right? That's the positive way of saying it. To have some nature of existing from its own side through some unique way of being. Negatively, what we're saying is it's not just made up in your mind. So I have a question for you guys. If existing by definition in this school means it comes from its own side, through its own unique way of being, and it's not simply made up with your mind, how many of the three attributes exist by definition? That's a long sentence, sorry. Let's see. Do kuntaks exist by definition according to the mind-only school? No. According to mind-only school, kuntaks don't exist by definition because they're just made up with your mind. So they don't have a definitive nature of their own. They don't have a unique way of being. What about shenwangs, dependent things? Do they exist by definition? In mind only, they do exist by definition because they aren't just imagined things. Rather, they are coming from their own side through a unique nature of their own. Right? So yes, Kadran, existing by definition also means existing through some self-existent way of their own, coming from their own side through a unique nature of their own. Furthermore, because they come from other things, they don't have a nature of growing without their causes and conditions. And I'm going to sneeze. Excuse me. Okay. So they do exist by definition because they aren't imagined things. And they don't have a nature of growing without their causes and conditions. Remember, we said by definition, it's not how we're defining the thing, it's the nature of the thing. By definition, again, it means to have some nature of existing from its own side through some unique way of being. Let me go. I'm going to hold off on those questions right now. Hold on. So we talked about kuntaks. We talked about shenwangs. Now, what about yongdrups, emptiness? Does it exist by definition? It does. Because it's not something that you just made up with your mind. Every object has emptiness, and emptiness has its own nature from its own side. Emptiness is empty. Its nature is that it's empty of having any self-nature. So let's go through this again. How many of the three attributes exist by definition in this school with your mind only hat on?
Well, 2.
Number 2 and number 3. Yeah, 2 of them. Yeah. So let's take a moment to compare and contrast that to the middle way school, which most of us are more comfortable in. Like, let's go back to the other classes we had. Does this pen exist by definition? According to the middle way school. Dependent things like a pen don't exist by definition because when you take away the name and the thought of it as a pen, that thing which is that luminous mental image that is forced on you by your past seeds, is there a pen there? No. This is why a dog seizes as a chewable object. So, according to middle way, nothing exists by definition. Have I got you all totally confused? I think so. This means that your aging and death are only a projection and therefore they can be changed. Now, mind-only school. Does the pen exist by definition? Yeah, because I'm not just making it up in my mind. I'm not just making the mail up in my mind. I'm not making, it has its own unique way of being from its own side. That's what mind-only school would say. Middle way? No, because if I strip away my idea of a pen, right? If I try to look at it as if I'm a dog or someone who never saw a pen before, I have no seeds to see it as a pen. Just strip that away. Strip away the name and the thought of it as a pen. Is there a pen there?
No.
Right. Yeah, if you don't have the seeds to see a pen, you won't see a pen. All right. So what does that have to do with my life? It's a projection to see myself getting old. It's a projection to see myself dying. And if I get it, if you get it, you can change your suffering. If it wasn't a projection, we're stuck. So what do we need to do? What do I need to do to change it? Collect a hell of a lot of good seeds, according to Middle Way. So cook it. Yeah, we need purification and merit and all of that stuff, right? So there are 3 classical metaphors for the 3 attributes. Yongdrup, the metaphor for Yongdrup, Namka Dandra, means emptiness is just like empty space. It is an absence of something like a physical obstruction, right? Like the only reason I can put this pen here is because there is nothing blocking it. It's empty space. And emptiness also has an absence of something. It's absent as being a self-existent thing. So empty space means place in which something is located, which is empty or free of having, some physical obstruction. It's an example of an unchanging thing. So there was a school in Tibet which believed that emptiness is a positive thing rather than an absence of a self-existent thing. Jason Kappa points out the error of this belief in his text. And we'll talk about it a little bit more later. We'll get into that, a little more later. A simple lack of physical matter in the sense of being a simple lack of a non excuse me. So where was I? A simple lack of physical matter in the sense of it being the simple lack of a non-existent self nature. As I said, literally, Yongdrup means everything exists, and it means that the minute an object exists, it is 100% empty. Yongdrup, totality, is the lack that both dependent things and totality itself has of being ultimate. Dependent things are not the thing perceived by the direct perception of emptiness. Totality is exactly the lack of an ultimate in the sense of a self nature, a lack of what emptiness denies. Again, constructs also lack a nature of being ultimate, but they don't look into them much here, since there weren't many people who understood them, as most people understood them as being imaginary and wouldn't mistake them for ultimate. So the metaphor for a Jungdrup is that emptiness or totality is just like empty space. There's nothing obstructing it. And then there's Shenwangs. Shenwang Gyuma, you might remember that word from the magic show, illusion. Gyuma Dangja. Shenwang, cause things, dependent things, are just like an illusion. So, in reality, they're coming from the same karmic seed that your eye perceiving them is coming from. Your eye and the object. But they appear to be coming from a separate karmic seed. So they're like a movie in that they trick you into thinking that they come from different energy than your eye, which perceives them. The pen seems to have come from a pen factory. The glass seems to have come from a glass factory. And your eye seems to have come from the biological causes of your body. But this is an illusion. The pen, the glass, my eye come from the same single seed that I created in the past. But we think it's out there. So a cause thing, Shenwang, a dependent thing, is like an illusion. It's like a magic show. It doesn't appear to us that a glass and our perception of the glass are the same substance. It appears to come from a different karmic seed, a separate one from our perception. We think it's out there. But the object and the eye, right, the sense consciousness, perceiving it come from the same seed. So back to Lord Buddha in the second turning of the wheel saying nothing has any nature of its own. Was he being literal? We have to ask the question, for who? Right. Which school? Good one. For who? Okay. Not, he says it's not literal in the mind-only school. We have to ask that question, for who? When someone just asks you a blanket question like, oh, is it literal? Right? In the mind-only school, what did he mean? Right? Going over it again, he said, I didn't say nothing has any nature of its own. Right? The second thing I meant was there's these changing things all around you. And when I said they don't have any nature of their own, from their own side, I meant they don't have any nature of just happening from their own side. They are happening because of some seed you planted. And then the third thing I meant was things don't have a nature of being ultimate. Changing things aren't ultimate because they are not what you perceive when you perceive emptiness directly. Kuntaks, images, constructs, aren't ultimate because you just make them up, and that is their emptiness. So he says, what I meant was there are certain things like mental images, constructs of your mind that don't have any definitive nature of their own. That's one thing I meant. The second, I meant that there are changing things all around you. And when I said they don't have any nature of their own, I meant they don't have any nature of just happening from their own side. Those constructs, those shenwangs, don't have any nature of growing because they never grow by themselves. They grow dependent on other things, on other factors. So what about these kuntaks, these sky flowers without soil, without water, right? So this is the metaphor for kuntaks. Kuntak namke, which means like in midair, meitok is flower, dangdrak, just like. So kuntak namke meitok dangdrak. Constructs are just like a flower that grows in midair because they're just imaginary things that are made up by your mind. The objects that constructs refer to can either exist, right, like the boitashi, or not exist, like a sky flower. A sky flower that could grow in midair without any soil or water. They're non-existent, right? But in this case, is that it is only an imaginary thing and not that it's non-existent. It doesn't exist by definition uniquely from its own side. So constructs don't have any definitive nature because they are only constructs of names and terms, words and luminous mental pictures. They don't exist from their own side through some unique nature of their own. So in the mind-only school, every existing thing has these three attributes. We're getting close to the end of class. So both middle way school and mind-only schools say that emptiness is the general absence of a self-existent thing that never could exist and never will. So what's a self-existent thing mean? It's different between the two schools. It's like, oh no. But both schools agree that Lord Buddha was being literal when he said it's just like empty space. It's just the absence of something that's not there. That's what emptiness is. And everybody agrees that Lord Buddha was being literal then. But could you then say in the same breath, if you're not crazy, right, that emptiness is this positive, self-standing object? Like it's this blackness? Could you, on one hand, say that Lord Buddha was being literal when he said emptiness is a simple lack or absence of something? And then on the other hand, say, yeah, emptiness is this little ball thing, this dark thing, this positive thing that stands out there on its own. Not if you were not crazy, but there was a school called the Jonangbas. And this is a homework question, so that's why we're covering it. And it's having a little bit of a comeback these days. People are interested in it. And people are saying these sorts of things like emptiness is a positive thing, right? It's a self-standing thing. And Lama Tsongkhapa refutes the idea. Remember, I mentioned this earlier, of the Jonampa school that challenges totality or emptiness as a self-standing positive object. He says it is a complete contradiction to say, one, that the wording of the sutra, what sutra? The commentary on true intent, is to be taken completely literally. Lord Buddha says in several ways that emptiness is a simple absence of something that does not exist. Lama Tsongkhapa says, and that is a complete contradiction then to say, two, emptiness is not the simple exclusion of what we deny when we speak of no self. So because we're running out of time, you can read it in your reading. It goes into it more there, but that's just a simple little answer that can help you with your homework. He says, no, it can't, right? So your meditation assignment, 15 minutes a day, alternate in meditation between seeing how a water glass does exist by definition, as the mind-only school teaches it, and doesn't exist by definition, as the middle way school teaches it. So you get to do that until we meet next week. And let's offer a mandala. Here is the great earth, filled with the smell of incense, covered with a blanket of flowers. The great mountain, the four continents, wearing a jewel of the sun and moon. In my mind, I make them the paradise of a Buddha and offer it all to you. By this deed, may every living being experience the pure world. Idam Guru Ratna Mandala Kam Niryatayami. And let's dedicate all of our hard work of trying to follow these teachings and all of this information and discernment in our own minds between the mind-only school's understanding and the middle way school's understanding, to all beings having the perfect understanding of emptiness so that they can change their suffering and the suffering of others and create a pure world. A world where we are peace. Okay. So it's almost, I said a class was going to be 1.5 to 2 hours. This was a long class. So thank you for hanging in there. Natasha has her hand raised.
I have a question. Can I ask?
Yeah, I'll try to answer.
Thank you so much for such a beautiful and deep teachings and such a difficult class explaining in very clear way. That really helped me. When you were teaching, I noticed that Geshe Michael Roach created the ACI 18 courses. And the first time he talked about dependent origination, I think it was ACI 5. And then he mentioned a little bit in ACI 13, not a little bit, he does mention. And I find that now he kind of, that's my perception, not contact from a middle school, that he drops the bomb. And now he explains dependent origination here in the mind only. That's how I understood. So my question is, when we talk about from a middle way school, Madhyamika Prasangika, about absolute reality, when we see emptiness directly, do we see dependent origination?
You see dependent origination prior to seeing emptiness directly.
Chucha. Okay. Okay.
So if we take the example of the pot on the stove, the dependent origination, or the dependent thing as he is calling it now, you are seeing yourself. You're seeing that this object out there has no self-existence as a pot. Or I'm going to say he saw that there's no existence of the pot because this was his experience. And he saw that this luminous image was coming out and being placed on this thing and creating a pot out of it. And that's the flip side of emptiness. That is the dependent side of emptiness.
So when we experiencing seeing emptiness directly, we already do have that knowledge of dependent origination.
I think it's what kicks you into the direct perception of emptiness.
Okay.
So, if we keep working on it, at some point we're going to look at the glass and realize, that what glass? What glass? And there's only a glass that I am being forced to see by how I treated others in the past, and it's coming out as the chocolate sauce on the ice cream. What about the ice cream? Same thing. Same thing.
And is that what Geshe is trying to do? Because throughout the first 14 classes, I didn't hear such a profound, maybe I am not that a good student, explanation of dependent origination that I hear in that school mind only. To kick us so we see the emptiness directly.
Geshe also has been bringing us along.
Yeah, it's thank you so much for answering, and thank you for such a extremely difficult material digesting in our brain in such a clear way, putting everything on the shelf.
I hope it's clear. So yeah, go back and listen to it. You may want to do this course more than once, And thank you so much to the interpreters for keeping up with me. I could only see Eka's face, and so I tried to keep up with her. I don't know about the other translators. And thank you to all the tech and everybody recording it for everybody else. And have a good weekend. Hope you can come online for the party, the Mixed Nuts 10th anniversary party on Monday. Happy Valentine's Day on Saturday. Lots going on. And I'll see you on Tuesday. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you, teacher. Thank you very much.
Thank you
Who
so
is-
much.
Whose
Thank
voice is
you.
that?
Thank you,
Thank you.
teacher.
Thank you, dear teacher. Please stay.
Okie dokie. See you next week.